Coach John here, episode 3. I know these episodes are being released irregularly. Regular releases are something I'm trying to work towards in the future, but presently the time constraints are real. Nevertheless, I'm trying to release 20 episodes by the end of the year on matters concerning self-improvement particularly, but any questions that you want me to address, I'm going to take those very, very seriously, and I'm going to try and do my best to answer them. There are two reasons why the time constraints are real. On the one side, running a club and doing a bunch of work, and on the other side, I really want to be prepared for the next episode. So once I identify a subject matter, I want to make sure that I'm reading and researching enough to know that what I'm saying is correct, even though that information is also imbued with my own experience. But nevertheless, it helps to provide data to support what I'm saying. This past 2 weeks, we've been quite busy. We've competed in Belgium and Albania, and I'm quite happy to say that the results we got were fairly decent. I'm quite happy with the team. We did some cool stuff too. We've been on 10-kilometer runs off-road with the team, and a bunch of them were really not looking forward to that, but they all did it, and it served as proof that they could do hard things. So hopefully that moral will translate into other matters of life as well. Which kind of brings me to the subject of today's episode, and we're going to talk about camaraderie. This episode is a follow-up of the Good Club discussion that we talked about briefly in the previous episode, and I'll talk about my experience on the effect of camaraderie in Taekwondo. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, when I'm talking about that word camaraderie, I mean the trust between one player and another in a team, and how one person can, if not a group of people, can enhance the qualities and the motivation of another when working towards a common goal. I will also talk about some niche things that you can only experience as a group if you are part of a Taekwondo team. So if you are part of a Taekwondo team, you're going to resonate with a lot of what I have to say. But yeah, let's get going on the subject of camaraderie. So I want to take some time to paint two pictures for you in your mind. On the first, you walk into the club and there's your friends. You slap hands with them, you laugh with them, you joke with them, and then when it's time to get serious in the training, you're all locked in. You might have had a bad day that day, long hours at school, long hours at work, but you showed up anyway, because you have to. Your teammates, they might sense that you're a little bit tired, but they push you. They shout at you, in a good way, of course. They pat you on the back. They partner with you, and they try to spur you on when they're holding the targets. You work hard as a result of that, and then you find yourself pushing them in the same way too, because you feel like you have to reciprocate. You successfully complete your 90 minutes of training with intention, with the right intensity, and you go home with the satisfaction of having banked in key minutes of improvement that day. You might even correspond with your teammates afterwards or your coach, discuss what went wrong, what went right, and talk about the session. And that, my friends, could be the debrief of the day, and you would have totally come out of it with a positive training experience. Conversely, on the other hand, you could walk in to the session, and let's say you could have walked into the session after having the best of days, but your teammates don't look at you, it's silent, there's no leader pushing you to overcome obstacles that you might find difficult in the training. You don't reciprocate with your other players. You don't communicate with your players out of the training. Your coach is a stranger to you. And the environment feels toxic, maybe ridden with contempt or jealousy. And you just can't wait to get out of there. And you do get out of there having performed less than you were expecting to perform, without even a word with your teammates. Then the next day comes and you do it all over again. I think you could see I mean, I am exaggerating and creating a totally positive and a totally negative effect for you to contrast between. But I think you can get what I'm saying, that the difference here is having good camaraderie. I mentioned these because I have an experience in both environments, and having good camaraderie was one of the principal motivators in my case to open the club in the first place, because my experience as a young athlete did not have that camaraderie, and I suffered a great deal because of that for a long time. And to be honest, it gave me a negative perception of the Taekwondo community until I started going abroad and being a part of different clubs abroad and seeing how other people were doing things and how the attitudes differed. And it kind of served as a massive awakening to me in what we really missed in Malta. And yeah, that's really why I wanted to create a club where people can grow together and people can encourage each other. I mean, to be fair, I find it hard to connect with people because by nature I am an introvert. Outside of Taekwondo, I don't often communicate, especially where small talk is concerned. My circle of friends is relatively small, of trusted friends at least. Aside from the communication I have with those friends, I tend to be a little bit too straight to the point where it's roped me into some conflict too. But what I do notice is that at the club, I'm different. And that place is something of a natural habitat to me. It's where my true self comes out. And it's where I really communicate. And I really like to joke with my players and the other coaches. And I do feel that there's a certain level of respect, even towards, I'd like to say, especially towards the newcomers and people who are trying to find the best version of themselves right there in front of me. I do have an immense amount of respect for those people, because everyone is on their journey, everyone's at different places in the stage of life. So I do respect that deeply, and I do resonate with that, and I tend to be a little bit more communicative with people who are going through that stuff. So yeah, when it comes to camaraderie, I always thought there was some value in that. I mean, logically speaking, if you find a place where there's enough energy to bring out your true self, then there's value in that, and you should keep on going there. I did. So despite my social shortcomings, and while I do enjoy strength gains and health gains and fitness gains concerned with Taekwondo practice, I often felt that the real perk was in the people, in the relationships, in the community. It kind of reminds me of my father a little bit. We've had this discussion many times. It's really funny because he actually built himself a home gym. My dad is an ex-bodybuilder, an ex-Mr. Malta, and training and lifting weights is very much a part of who he is. But on many occasions, he just stops and gets a gym membership in a commercial gym where he has to wait in queues to use a machine or a bench or a set of dumbbells that are being used by someone else who's sitting on his bench and texting his girlfriend. But yeah, I always come up to him and ask him, like, why? You have your home gym. You can sit there alone and do your thing and take as much time as you want. And it's like, yeah, but I like being around people, and I like talking with this guy. I feel at home there. People are going there and they have a mutual interest to lift weights, to improve themselves, and I kind of resonate with that, and I want to keep doing that. And I'm like, fair enough. I totally get that. And when it comes to Taekwondo, it's probably more so because the improvement can only come when you have others around you. Taekwondo is by nature an individual sport. I mean, to be fair, we are there on the mat in the competition alone. One athlete, one opponent, one mat, and one result. But anyone who's been on the inside knows it's never individual. The preparation is very much a team effort. So that brings me to this. In my experience, serious environments with locked-in athletes ready to buzz their asses often bring in results together as a collective. And I think that's beautiful, because even though the result is individual, you must acknowledge how profound the assistance from other players is towards the preparation of that achievement. There are three things I want to highlight here as to why this camaraderie is important. I would boil it down to three things. And the first one is how the qualities of individuals tend to rub off on one another to some degree. So if one rises, then the others are forced to adapt. Conversely, if the others rise, then you are forced to adapt. So that is why I always say that iron sharpens iron. So think about it like this. If you have a team with 10 people and two of them hit a training camp or they go to a series of competitions abroad and they're away from the team for a while, but they engage in a very difficult and very constructive experience. Then a month later, these guys come back with a newfound experience. And they learned some things. And when they competed, they analyzed and they grew from the experience. Their experience over that month would rub off the teammates as a collective. So I guess you could say that everyone in the collective team would develop following the experience of just one or two people having undergone something productive. Consistency is another factor. If your buddies are showing up, locked in, and collectively tying you to the mission, then it makes you less likely to skimp out on the session. In fact, I think we had mentioned this last time round as well. If I had to just randomly miss a session, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get a message from one or two folks, at least the sparring partners that I usually work with, asking me why the hell I didn't show up. If not also the coach too. When belonging becomes part of identity, you showing up becomes a non-negotiable. Discipline becomes social. Effort becomes responsibility-driven. So in tightly knit groups, you would expect to see athletes showing up tired, pushing through discomfort, or even, let's say, maintain long-term commitment better than others. Then the third point I want to discuss is the athletes who have a certain amount of leadership. As we said before, individual qualities tend to rub off one another, but it's really, really good if you have athletes who have charisma. Charismatic athletes bring energy to the room. They tend to adopt a commanding presence through body language more often than not. So it's not just in the way they shout or in what they say. Both of those things are important as well. But it's in the way they carry themselves. And you feel responsible to match their energy and to keep the pace up with them. In turn, they make you push harder. And since the common endpoint is you both pushing each other harder, then the team is collectively pushing hard. Like I said in the first point, their attitudes, the charismatic guys, they tend to rub off on the others who at some stage will wind up doing the same thing to others. So thanks to them, you could potentially have up-and-coming athletes assume leadership roles within the team, and the cycle just keeps going on and on and on. There again, I do feel that the coach would have a very significant role in promoting leadership among the athletes. So yeah, I think it's very good that the head of the serpent in the club is someone with strong leadership qualities. So talking about all of this in terms of leadership, in terms of consistency, in terms of how the qualities of one athlete tend to rub off on one another, this is all thanks to the camaraderie of the club, and the camaraderie of the club just doesn't come out of nowhere. You need something for that, and what you do need is culture. In a club, in a team, culture matters. You hang out with 5 idiots, and most assuredly, you will become the 6th. Conversely, if you hang out with 5 animals, then again, most assuredly, you will become the 6th. Culture for me, and the seriousness of it, is kind of like a spectrum. So if the culture, the environment is too relaxed, as opposed to purposeful, hard, and wired, then you can guess what the collective outcome would be. But now we must be careful as well, because if on the other hand the culture is toxically competitive and marred with jealousy, then I would say that too is going to prevent real growth. Because how can your friends grow when your real intention is to cripple them? And how can you yourself grow if you are not conducive to the growth of people that will help you grow? These are two very important questions that you must ask yourself. And if you do feel yourself getting jealous of others, and if you do notice that there are others jealous of you in the club, then you must understand that this is a real problem. And if that is the case, that is something to immediately work on. All things considered, the equation is simple. Healthy personal relationships plus healthy culture equals real growth. Let's talk about this culture for a second. This culture is one that you find in all martial arts, and typically Taekwondo. It's not often something understood from the outside world, I feel. So when you casually talk about Taekwondo with a friend or with an acquaintance in the outside world, they are thinking on the lines of punching and kicking and getting a black belt and all of that. But deep down, the power isn't just in punching and kicking. Think about it like this. I, as a Taekwondo coach, could train a kid one-on-one. I could teach him how to punch, how to kick, how to move. We could hit pads session after session with the possible extension of sparring if I jump in as a sparring partner. But could you honestly say that after a few years of just that, without a club environment, without teammates, without a community, without a culture, that that kid would be ready for an actual competition? Because I very much doubt it. Part of the whole experience as a team is also the memories made along the course of the competitive journey. And I'm talking about the good and the bad experiences. And believe me, the bad experiences, they are just as important, if not even more important. Bad memories turn warm eventually because they are a stark reminder that you overcame something difficult. Just like the thing I mentioned in the beginning of this episode when I said I took the kids out for a 10-kilometer run, and most of them were like, ugh, 10 kilometers. I've never done 10 kilometers in my life, and moreover, off-road, we had to stay hiking across sharp rock and running in strange areas. But we did it together as a team. And I was very closely watching how the team players responded to one another. Because if, let's say, one of us was slowing down, then the others tended to match the pace of the person who was slowing down until they could pick it up altogether again. Those with a little bit more leadership tended to verbally say, hey guys, let's slow down. Someone is tracking back, so let's just do this all together. So they would verbally say that. And others, of course, individually met the person who was tracking back and just stayed with that person just to make sure that they're not alone. So I was seeing all of these things, and this was all good. This is all what camaraderie is all about. And of course, when you do cross the finish line, there is a mutual sense of satisfaction, and I felt that everybody was proud of each other for accomplishing this feat. Talking about the science of camaraderie, there's been decades of science that has backed camaraderie as the invisible engine of performance. In some cases, the data available to us has even shown that group cohesion can somewhat predict performance in individual sports. So higher cohesion within groups has been shown to lead to better competition outcomes, more persistence under fatigue, and lower dropout rates. Other benefits have been shown clearly. So, for example, one was that humans tended to perform better on trained tasks when other persons were present watching them because arousal increases, effort increases. One's standards automatically tend to rise in the presence of others. So around others, you can expect to, let's say, lift heavier or sprint faster and even push longer in grueling moments. Maybe it's because of an innate tendency to show off. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's something that tends to be cognitively automatic. And what about shared adversity? One example I often tend to allude to is the weigh-in struggle associated with the sport. That is probably one of the most common shared adversities among players. But that too has enhanced relationships. I can think of one time where we were abroad and I did have one athlete, a girl who had a difficult cut, and she was on her last few grams, and we had to sweat it out. And I just remember her stepping on the scale, and it was just not there yet. And she was starving, she was hungry, she was dehydrated. And I noticed that it was a little bit sunny outside, and I said, listen, let's go for a little run, you and me together. We don't have to pick up big pace, it's just put on some clothes, and you're just going to stay with me. And we just did a really, really slow run, and I just kept matching her pace, and I kept trying to provoke a little extra push from her every now and then. And we kept talking about stuff all the way through, and eventually, we kind of laughed about it, and we knew we were going to laugh about it later once the whole thing was over, because we were comfortable and we knew that we were going to get the job done. And it happened exactly that way. We did the run. There was a fair share of suffering, but yeah, we got through it, and she weighed in successfully, and we went out and we had a nice meal after that. And yeah, so I guess it was like a little bit of a happy ending, but that's just one example I could think of the top of my head. So I would say that, considering that experience and many others that I've faced and that I've shared with others, a good way to get people to gel together is to put them through some hard shit together. Shared experiences that are predictable, voluntary, and endured, they tend to create a strong social glue. And I do think that they can be used as firepower to create solid friendships. And those solid friendships, in turn, they're going to translate to having a great culture in the club, and they're going to have athletes push each other and respect each other in the long run. So this brings me to the next talking point. And over the past few days, when I had nothing to do, which was not very often, but anyway, over the past few days, I tried to jot down some experiences that you can only find in Taekwondo. Some are good and some are bad. All of them, though, are inherent to the nature of the game. So if you're in the game or been in the game, you're probably going to feel some familiarity with what I'm about to say. So the first thing I want to start with is the weight cuts. The weighing cues and the first sip of water you take right after you successfully weigh in. I've had so many experiences here that it's just crazy, like on a personal level. I think the biggest cut I had ever done in a competition was 5 point something kilos within 24 hours. The weighing cuts are deeply annoying, and depending on where you go in the world, the weighing procedures are either going to make or break you. So I've been in some countries competing where everything was just like perfect. You had an appointment, you go in and you go out, and that's it. But then we've been in other countries where you've stuck waiting in this ridiculously long queue with people who are on the verge of depression, and there's this smell of sweat. Beside you, you have folks in sweat gear just kicking it out, and they're already half dead because they've been doing that for God knows how long. But this is, I think, the first real challenge before fight day, and I'm really happy to see that a lot of people aren't cutting the way I used to see when I was a senior in the past. Nowadays, with the way the game is played, a lot of people who are on the edge are making decision to fight upper class and feel a little bit better and a little bit healthier overall. There are some really negative consequences to bouncing up and down with the weights, and that's something I would like to talk about one day. But thinking about the weigh-ins, I would say that the one thing I really would look forward to after a weigh-in, now don't get me wrong, I haven't cut weight in ages, but on memory, it's just that sip of cold water after you successfully weigh in. I think that tastes better than the sweetest of honeys. And the meal that you get afterwards, and all the glorious food that you eat. But I think the weigh-ins are probably like the most annoying part of the game, and they're very necessary for obvious reasons. Going into the second thing now, I will talk about the draw sheets. So the draw sheets, to this day, my heart races when I notice that the draw sheets have come out. I'm usually in a hotel room by myself or with another coach, but it's usually a quiet environment, and you're waiting for the draw sheets to come out, and you're constantly refreshing the page, the online page where the thing comes out, or unless it's obviously going to come through Messenger or Telegram or whatever. But yeah, on most occasions you're just refreshing this page, and then all of a sudden you notice that it's been uploaded. And in my case, at least, I can feel my heart thumping. But then I'm just like scrolling through the whole thing and saying, crap, okay, so this guy's gonna have a hard match, this guy's gonna, okay, this guy's got an easy match. So yeah, it's a bit of a crazy emotion. And I remember one fine day, we were abroad in, I think it was Estonia. And we were a small team, maybe 5 or 6 players. And it was a small stage game, so it wasn't like a really occupied competition. It wasn't a really populated competition. And I had 2 fighters in my team who ended up together in the first match. And that was just stupidly terrible, And I just remember seeing that and going, but why, like we're going to eliminate one guy from our own team without him having the experience of at least playing against a guy from another club or country. But yeah, I mean, it's part of the game, and it's something that you have to prepare for as well. It kind of brings me to the third point, which is a situation that I faced myself and many others have faced as well. It's a situation that I came across when I was competing a couple of weeks ago in Belgium. Have you ever watched someone dominate a match, someone in your bracket dominate a match on your court whilst you're waiting for your turn to play? So imagine that you fight 10 on court 1 and you're in a semi-final, and fight 9 on your court is the other semi-final in your bracket, and you just see this guy completely wipe out the opponent, and you know that if you win your fight, you're going to end up having to face this guy. This has happened to me twice this year already, and that feeling is quite remarkable, because you're like, okay, I want to win my match, but I know I'm going to have to face this guy afterwards. And I'm really curious to how a lot of people deal with that. I've had some athletes in my team be like, yeah, I'm going to win this one, I'm going to try my best in the final, I don't care. And then I've had other athletes, and to be honest, I think I fall under this bracket, believe it or not, say, shit, this is going to be intense, like I hope I can do that. But it's always good to see, and I think it's worth considering that every person is different, and every person responds to the other person differently. So they could just as easily be watching you and saying, oh shit, this guy is going to be my opponent in the final. And to be honest, there are some qualities that your opponent might have taken advantage of in the semi-final that he won't manage to take advantage of in the final. And I think a healthy way to look at that is that you need to recognize what the positive qualities of the opponent are and understand that you can't change them, but you must understand that you can work on how you respond to the positive qualities of that opponent. In the end, we must understand that we cannot change anything about the referees, the opponent, the court, the PSS. We can't change any of that. What we can change is how we are going to respond, how we're going to act, and how calm we're going to be when the shit goes south in the match. So that's one little pearl of wisdom that I could leave you with before going into the fourth point, and that is the Ryanair luggage wars. And this is, again, something that really pisses me off whenever we're traveling. I'm curious to see how many of you listeners have ended up warring with the Ryanair stuff or any other airline stuff. I'm using Ryanair because we fly at Ryanair all the time. And have you ever been chastised for having an overweight hand luggage and hassled at the gate just before your flight? Because it happens to us every single time, and I swear to God, the criteria changes from one person to the other. So on some occasions, I have to say though, it's always the same guys that get targeted. But anyway, so yeah, you end up with having this bulky bag because you have all the protectors and all the things, and you go in and the Ryanair staff asks you to check the size of your bag, and you fail. And then you need to open the bag and put on your jackets and your hoodies, and you end up looking like some weird hobo. But yeah, I mean, like, more often than not, we always end up scraping through the check-in and going in. But I always thought that the situation was awkward, because once we do get there, we always just end up putting the stuff back in the bag, and, you know, everyone's none the wiser. I do have to say that it would be really funny if somebody had to just walk into the gate, guards on and dolbuk on. I mean, technically they are wearables, so it might make for a sight to see by most of the passers-by over there. But anyway, I'll go to the fifth point, and the fifth point now is bringing the situation into the club environment, since we're talking about camaraderie. Have you ever been in the situation in a club where you are just killing it, but the one time you mess up just happens to be the only time your coach is looking at you? As a coach, of course, I created a bit of a caveat in that, because I installed cameras in the club, and I do very often watch training footage from those cameras in my free time. In fact, I think it's really important, because having a team of 20, 30 people train at the same time, it's really difficult to keep track of everyone. And from the mistakes that I see in that footage, it kind of helps me construct training blocks and sessions based on the mistakes that I see in those sessions. But I do have athletes who like to show off. They'll be doing all sorts of really cool stuff, really athletic stuff. And, you know, when I catch someone doing this cool stuff, I'll just be strolling along and going to see, and then all of a sudden the next repetition ends up being a complete blunder. And, you know, they're looking at me and they're like, I swear it was good before. I'm like, don't worry, I believe you. But to be honest, I believe them because I've been in that situation myself, you know, where I'm really, really trying and things are coming off perfectly, and then my coach looks at me, and then all of a sudden it's like I forgot all the years of Taekwondo just for that moment. Right, so the next thing, going back to competition, point number 6 is the PSS struggles, and especially from this year on. Have you ever laid an absolute banger on the opponent and it doesn't score? Then he returns with a little touch and scores. Isn't that the most frustrating thing? Especially when it's a headshot. Nowadays, this has become a little bit more profound with the Gen 3 and the K2 systems, which, in my opinion, tend to be a little bit frustrating. Nowadays, WT have removed the rule of IVRs, of the video replay challenges. So when you hit a headshot, and that doesn't score, of course, the coach cannot challenge it. So you can just imagine the frustration of having gotten a headshot and you feel the head guard beneath your foot and it doesn't score. But then conversely, the opponent just like takes a swipe at you and hits you with a pinky toe, and you see the score go up in his favor. This happens once, twice, 3 times, and you know, like you lose a match basically on bullshit. So yeah, that's the Taekwondo game, and it's fair play because it's the same ground for everyone. The way I see it at this stage, you just need to adapt to landing as many shots as possible. So this will obviously increase your chances of scoring. Of course, being an efficient fighter will make it better for you, because you do have those types of fighters who are hitting all the time and never scoring. So if you have a non-favorable conversion rate, I do suggest that you do a lot of work with the PSS and try and figure out what type of movements are working and what type of movements are not working, because it's very individual. I have seen fighters with a very good efficiency ratio, and most of them aren't really kicking that hard, but they're kicking in the right place and they're kicking with the right technique too. So they're kind of just like throwing their leg in a kind of whipping way rather than slamming the chest guard. And they're getting a little bit of push into the chest guard often as well, so that tends to score the point as well. But yeah, that's on PSS struggles. Going to the 7th point then, there's the smell of the dojang. Yeah, I mean, I've been to many dojangs in and out of Europe, and they all have a common smell, you know, like smell of stale sweat mixed often with menthol, you know, the stuff that you get from like deep heat and stuff. And, you know, a lot of people who are not in the scene, I mean, I wouldn't say not in the scene, but, you know, like parents and friends and whatever, they walk in and they're like, oh my God, what the hell is that smell? But yeah, I mean, like, you really can't get rid of that, you know, that just like, it's like stuck in the mats and in the air of the room. It's obviously amped up by the players' protective equipment, which I swear to God, they just don't wash. And none of them want to wash it anyway because it ruins the Velcro and all of that stuff, you know. So yeah, the moment they open their bag, the profundity of that smell just increases tenfold. Then you do the session, everybody's sweating, of course. Then you leave and you close the gym, and then that's it. And now, believe it or not, as a Taekwondo coach, one of my jobs is to actually clean the place. And I do clean the place, and I do clean the mirrors, and I do sweep the floors. But that smell is just sort of like still stuck in the mats. You know, I often wondered if I'm doing something wrong, but when I go from dojang to dojang to dojang, like the world, like that smell, it's just like the same smell everywhere. You know, whether I'm in Italy or in England or in Germany or in Belgium, like the moment you step into a dojang, especially if you're sort of like sitting on the mats, you know, you're smelling the smell of Taekwondo. There's also the tape. This is both in the dojang and in the competition. So this is like the 8th thing I wanted to highlight. The tape. Oh my God, there's like tape everywhere. Taped ankles, taped fingers, taped knees, taped... I don't know, man. People are going to start taping their heads too, probably at some stage. But yeah, the tape is kind of like a big thing. Like every time, like on one occasion, I was at the hospital and, you know, they have this Tensa Plus tape, and you know, every time I look at it, I'm thinking about Taekwondo. You know, like I have athletes who religiously tape their ankles before every match in the perfectly precise way that they want. Same thing concerning these little injuries, you know. So for example, if you need to tape your fingers together, or if you need to tape your wrists together, there's tape. Always tape, tape, tape. Yeah, and now moving on to the 9th point is the feeling of being a senior in a cadet and junior environment. And this is hilarious, you know, this is something I've seen so many times, or a coach even, you know. So when there's a cadet and junior event like an E2 or E3, and then you end up having a senior athlete walking around, they're walking around feeling like a Jedi master. And the coach too, no matter the state of fitness, you know, like as a coach or as a senior athlete walking around a junior or cadet dominated environment, there's a really strange feeling of being like yeah, I would call it like the Jedi master, you know, like with people looking at you and saying, oh, he's the senior athlete, oh, he's competing in the G1s and all of that, you know, like, yeah, it's like a little subtle feeling that's experienced out there. And now I conclude with the 10th point. This took me some time to compile. I have this one written down in front of me just so I don't forget. Many of the guys in my team and many of the guys in different teams all over the world have obviously at some stage visited dojangs other than their own. Okay, so they've gone to other dojangs within the country and other dojangs out of the country. They've participated in training camps, made friends with other teams and other potential teammates and competitors, and they've been around the block a lot. And what I find really funny is that you always find the same characters across different dojangs, you know, the same character archetypes. Probably the most obvious one is what I would call the natural. So the natural is, you know, that guy who barely stretches and he barely looks tired ever. And he picks up a technique immediately and lands a spinning kick like it's nothing. And the best part is he's always usually doing that at about 50% of his maximum. But he's often clueless otherwise. You know, he's like this gifted guy, but he's always inconsistent. You know, he's doing all the crazy things, all the jumps, all the spins, all of that stuff. But then he just randomly misses a session in the week or two. But when he comes, he's always this danger man. And because of his inconsistency, he ends up not going as far as he should. Because of that, he's probably the guy who's pissing off the coach, because the coach is looking at this gold mine of a player who's just lazy and inconsistent, and despite all of the prompt, is just totally ignored. But yeah, I think every gym has one of those. Then you have the grinder. So This is the guy who's always on time, maybe even earlier, just to warm up before the warm up. He works hard and he sweats hard and he always wants to improve. He's like, I would say, the club lieutenant, so so if there are slackers around him, he gets pissed off. And, like the mentality of slackers, he just doesn't get that because he's built different. He thinks about Taekwondo at school. He thinks about Taekwondo at work, maybe even when he's on a toilet. His TikTok algo is strictly Taekwondo. Then you have your philosopher. So this is the guy who's asking 20 questions per drill, hoping to understand the biomechanics associated with each drill. To him, like Taekwondo is kind of like a science, a complex to be broken down into scientific principles like he can apply in various situations. He doesn't compute in circumstances where shit doesn't go, quote, as it's supposed to, because it's just not the way he's wired. To him, it's just like strictly scientific and broken down, always the same, left, right, and center. So yeah, you have the natural, the grinder, the philosopher, and the next one, the fourth one, is the quiet assassin. And I know all of you guys listening to this who are in the scene know who I'm talking about. Have you ever seen that really underweight, pasty-looking, usually kind of nerdy kid with the glasses who just stays there, expressionless? He's usually a little socially awkward as well. So yeah, that guy will score 3 clean head kicks with a single action. He's the guy you underestimate once, but never again, because he will wipe you out. I've seen national players like this. I remember I was in the 2015 World Championship in Chelyabinsk, Russia, and we were just in this hotel in the middle of nowhere. And I remember there was one team, I can't remember whether it was US or Canada, and there was a lightweight athlete there, and he was just this guy, like scrawny looking, with glasses. He had a gaunt face. Honestly, I can't remember who he was. I can't remember what country it was. It might not even have been USA or Canada, but I'd like to say it was in the Americas. And I had remarked and said, man, this guy's in the national team of so-and-so, like how he must be packing some firepower, he must have won some competitions, he must have gone through some selection. And we watched that guy fight, and oh my God, man, this guy was just like all over the place. He was just scoring effortlessly. It just so happens that I came across fellas like that in a club. I wouldn't really think I have one of these guys in my club right now, but yeah, like it's a character archetype that you tend to find from place to place. Moving on to the next one. So you have the contortionist, and this is another common archetype in the world of Taekwondo. So it's that kick who can kick in these really awkward ways. Has got like unusual hip and leg mobility that just doesn't make sense to the other guys or the coach. I do have one or two of these guys in my club, and they can, kick in really uncomfortable, awkward ways. These guys, from what I see, they tend to lack cardio sometimes, or even a bit of strength when it comes to kicking, but they make up for it with this flexibility, and the legs are just like heat-seeking missiles that hit you in ways that probably even he is not even sure of, or she is not even sure of. They just throw it there, and wherever it lands, it lands. You got your latecomer. So this is the guy who arrives just in time, and he'd have skipped the majority of the warm-up, and he replaces it with a single hamstring stretch, maybe even only stretching one side, the good side, and then with a humble "I'm good" hits the session, only to eventually pull a muscle mid-session. Next, you have your gym bro. So this guy may be a little bit short for his category, but make no mistake, he's jacked and he's strong and he's tough. So he's deadly with the cut, usually, or the punch. His leg feels like a piano when it's right on top of you. And for him, flexible fighters, they are a lesser breed. So he's also rarely upset. This is one thing I tend to notice with the jacked guys doing Taekwondo. So I mean, it's fair to say that when you do look like an Olympic god, not many other common matters can dampen your spirit. Most clubs also have a veteran, and these guys are absolute legends. These guys are walking Bibles of experience and injuries, and they mostly have a tendency to be taped. We had talked about taping earlier, but these guys, they would usually be taped or will wear a support in some way, like a knee support or an ankle support. But yeah, I really like these veteran seniors or veteran like masters athletes, for example, that have been training as a senior in the past and then moved into the masters. These guys move economically and they have seen much, some things that you can't even comprehend. Your level of experience doesn't even compute, that doesn't even equate to anywhere near these guys' experience. They don't panic when the draw sheets come out and the weigh-ins are just an inconvenience to them, everything is sorted, they have everything under wraps. They'll often play with the back leg because that's real Taekwondo, and they will shadow all of the coach's directives, of course, because he has seen much, as we said. Also, these guys, they just can't get on the same page with the kids these days. To him, it's like a failed generation of social media addicts, whiners and complainers. And yeah, they're reliving the good old days where people were tougher, let's put it that way. And that brings me to the last character archetype, so the sponsored athlete. So it's only Nike for him or only Adidas, but definitely not a combination of the two. You have a guy with perfect hair, perfect physique. He even smells nice. This is the guy who will pull off all the crazy moves you see on Instagram with all the pre- and post-match rituals you see in the Olympics. Like when somebody's competing, they're stretching in awkward ways, or they're celebrating in this way whenever they make the punch. Just like these really aggressive athletes you see on Instagram and TikTok and whatever. Yeah, and they bring that energy straight into the club. Yeah, but these are the character archetypes. You could have one persona or a mixture of two or three of the personas, but they tend to be a common denominator from club to club, and I deduce what archetype they are whenever I meet them. It's a pretty fun thing for me to do on my travels, and yeah, it's all interesting because these characters, while they are common, they are the key players forming that unity, that camaraderie in the club, and they are all very, very important. And it's so good, and it's so nice to have a mixture of different characters mixing it up together, and it's so interesting to see how they interact and how they can affect each other. And it's also really interesting to see how they handle the tough moments and how they emerge from those tough moments together as a group. But in conclusion, yeah, I would say that camaraderie is most certainly the invisible engine of performance. It's something that is not to be underestimated, and it is something to be promoted as a coach and as an athlete and as friends and family in the community. So I would encourage parents to contribute to the group growth within the club and to steer away from ultra competitiveness and toxic competitiveness because they could be the major challenges in that environment, more so than, let's say, being quiet or reserved. Yeah, I mean, to conclude, I would say that the best way to see the club is a world away from the world, that you can step there and for 90 minutes, the bills, the work, the stress, the responsibilities, they just stay at the door. I mean, obviously, it's not the problems that disappear. It's just that for that time, you're allowed to focus entirely on your own improvement. And as an ancillary to that, you can emerge with a better mental focus to handle the challenges ahead in life. The Taekwondo clan, it's just like family. And, sometimes that love for one another has reached a certain level because you start to take each other for granted, like family. We argue, but at the same time, we push, we frustrate each other, but at the same time, we are very happy when somebody succeeds, more often than not. And that is a beautiful thing. And sometimes we forget how rare it is to have people who are ready to suffer together with us voluntarily. Of course, I try to promote it. I do have my own shortcomings here as well. I tend to be a little bit too regimental. But at its core, I tend to be regimental because I want what's best for my guys. So I tend to be a little bit on them, with respect to how they behave, how they eat, when they get something wrong in training and we're forced to repeat and repeat and repeat. But yeah, I think overall the process is beautiful, and I'm very blessed to have a team. I'm very blessed to have my team with such unique characters and lots of potential, lots and lots and lots of potential. And I only wish to see them achieving their dreams in and out of Taekwondo. I want to see them attain success, whatever success may be for them. But yeah, I can leave it at that today. And for the next episode, for the fourth episode, I do have some material with which to work on. I have something very interesting in mind that I want to talk about in the next episode. But in the meantime, if you are listening to this and you want me to address something, then just drop me a message and I will do it at some stage at least. So with that, I'll bid you goodbye and until next time.